Well, welcome back to Propaganda Loves You, the show that asks and answers the question, if we don't have a Voting Rights Act in America, are we really still a democracy? I mean, I don't know, Joe. Like, your answer was probably no before that anyway.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Thank you for joining us today. I'm joined by Arthur and Joe. We've got a core episode today. We're going to talk about a bunch of different things that we've got that we could have run into since we haven't been on a call together in about a month. But we'll hit a bit on the Voting Rights Act and what's occurred there. I know Arthur's got an update for us on that, and we'll talk a bit about Trump's proclivity for PR stunts. I think it's an appropriate conversation to have in the middle of our Century of Self and Bernays deep dive episodes that we're running this week. So we'll talk about that and then close up with Joe giving us an update on Mayday and some more community organizing. Before we get into all of those fun topics, I did want to do a quick listener update. So we actually did cross 1 year of putting out episodes this last April. So April 1st was when we dropped our first episodes, 2025. And so I wanted to give a quick update on where we are since then. And so I think last time we gave an update, we were still missing like 6 or 7 different states. We have had a couple more of those join us in the last, since we've updated last time. According to our analytics from Captivate, 2,300 unique listeners over that year-long period, with around 4,400 total unique downloads. 77 countries. I think that's a slight uptick from last time that we had across the 6 continents. Singapore, Vietnam, UK, China, Spain, Russia, and Mexico rounding out the top 8. The Singapore and Vietnam, I don't know how much of that is VPNs or legit, but either way, we'll take it. And then in the United States itself, I think we were around 5 or 6 states that hadn't yet listened. So right now we're sitting at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we have added another state. If you guys remember, I think last time we added New Hampshire and Vermont to our totals. So we were still missing Maine, Delaware, West Virginia, Mississippi, South Dakota, and Idaho. So out of those, who do you think joined us in our venture?
That'd be Maine.
Oh, Maine.
Jinx.
Both say Maine. No, it's Delaware. We finally have one.
Oh. Fuck.
Only one single download in Delaware. Maybe it was someone on the bridge on their way into New Jersey, because we've seen a lot of uptick in our New Jersey listeners too. But yeah, we've got 8 states that have over 100 downloads. New York still number 1 spot with over 1,000. We're sitting at 1,100 there. Over 500 in California. Virginia crossed the 400 threshold. You're at 430. Maryland, you're around 330 downloads. Texas has broken 200. You're at 220. And then New Jersey, Oregon, and Washington are all in the 130 to 150 range at the moment.
I think of like a quarter U.S. map where you used to get the quarters and like fill them in every time you bring up a state, and it's like filling it in my mind.
My grandparents got me one of those for a really young, I don't remember what birthday. It was when they first came out with the table, that specific like U.S. state table.
When did they start doing the state quarters? Was that? I feel like that was when we were kids, or maybe they just revamped it for us when we were kids and they had already been doing it, or was it new?
Maybe. I feel like that was something that started when I was a kid, because my grandparents, it wasn't an antique thing, but...
It's funny because my grandparents got me the map.
The map?
Like a fold-out map. They gave me some quarters. So it must have been when we were...
Yeah, good times.
1999.
99?
According to U.S. Mint.
Okay.
Started in 1999. So yeah, we were right. That was for us.
That was
specifically.
And I've still got it. All right. So like I mentioned, it's been a minute since the 3 of us have been on a call. So we're going to play a real or fake for headlines. So I'm going to read off 6 things that may or may not have happened in the last, 30 days or so. I'll give you the clue up front. 2 of these are fake, 4 are real and have occurred. So I'll say off all 6 of these, and then you guys can tell me which ones you think are not true. All right. Are you guys ready? Okay. Number 1, Oklahoma Republicans are advancing a legislative measure to formally secede from the Catholic Church and establish a new American Catholic diocese, which calls to appoint a domestic pope aligned with conservative values. Number 2, Trump posted an AI-generated image of himself as Jesus Christ on Truth Social. When asked about it by reporters, he said, "I thought it was me as a doctor." Number 3, someone opened fire at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Trump was rushed off stage by Secret Service. Number 4, U.S. intelligence officials have traced the viral Iranian Lego propaganda videos back to a cartel-connected media operation in Mexico, allegedly producing anti-American content in exchange for sanctions relief negotiations. Number 5, The Onion has legally acquired InfoWars and plans to relaunch it as a parody of itself with comedian Tim Heidecker as host. And number 6, Viktor Orban lost the Hungarian election in a historic landslide, and the winner immediately held a press conference revealing that Orban was secretly funding CPAC with Hungarian taxpayer money. So I'll run through those really quickly again. Number 1, Oklahoma Republicans want to secede from the Catholic Church and create their own American Pope. Number 2, Trump as AI Jesus. Number 3, shooting at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Number 4, Iranian Lego videos are actually coming from a cartel in Mexico. Number 5, The Onion has acquired InfoWars. And number 6, Viktor Orban lost the Hungarian election and had been funding CPAC. All right. And CPAC, Conservative Political Action Committee in America, that, Elon Musk was on stage waving a chainsaw around like I think a year ago at that. So yeah. So any guesses as to which 2 of those are incorrect?
Well, I was just trying to eliminate the obvious true ones that I've read about recently. And through that, I feel like number 1 and number 4, the Oklahoma Republican Church new diocese thing, those are my guesses for the fakes. Okay. 1 and 4.
All right.
Yeah, I hate to be boring, but I was going to say 1 and 4 as well.
We're vibing.
Yeah, you are correct. Yeah. So, yeah, the headline number 1 is fake, but there is something that actually did happen with the Catholic Church in the last 30 days. According to American Magazine, Trump posted a 330-word Truth Social rant calling Pope Leo, who's the first American-born pope in history, quote, weak on crime and terrible on foreign policy. Then on CBS News, J.D. Vance.
Such a funny criticism of the Pope to make.
Just weak on crime. Man. Then, according to CBS News, J.D. Vance, a man who converted to Catholicism in 2019, went on Fox and told the leader of the Catholic Church that, quote, in some cases, it might be best for the Vatican to stick to matters of morality of the Catholic Church and let the President of the United States to stick to dictating policy. The Irish Times ran a long piece on Vance's relationship with the church and noted he had actually been wrestling publicly with this exact tension since 2021, asking out loud at a conservative Catholic conference how a new Catholic should handle disagreeing with the Pope. And apparently he's figured that out. Vance also invoked World War II to argue against the Pope's war position, asking whether God was on the side of Americans who liberated France and freed the Holocaust camps, and answering himself with a yes. So we didn't secede from the Catholic Church, kind of just told him to fuck off, I think, is kind of how that went from the U.S. government. Number 2 was real. According to CNBC, Trump posted an AI-generated image of Truth Social showing himself in a white robe, laying a glowing hand on a dying man with eagles, military planes, and the American flag in the sky behind him. He actually posted that minutes after calling the Pope weak on crime. Headline number 3 was also real. So yes, there was a shooting at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. I think everyone's kind of aware of at this point. And, what has immediately happened online with the accusations of a staged assassination attempt and whatnot that have been coming out since that. So we'll talk more about that. Number 4, yes, this is fake. Those Lego AI videos are not coming from a Mexican cartel in Iran. According to Fortune magazine, the Lego videos were made by a group inside Iran called Akbar and Fiarj. I'm gonna get that wrong. And Farji. Anyway. Basically, this means explosive news in Persian, who described themselves as an independent student collective. However, there's from that same reporting, it kind of notes that anyone that's able to make that quality and have the bandwidth, that they probably have some connection to the Iranian government. But that's the story, that is a student collective that's making those videos inside Iran.
Having seen a couple of those, they're definitely made by young people because whatever they are funny.
Yeah.
They are extremely funny videos, unfortunately. But yeah.
They definitely understand the cultural grabs in America. Like that was actually one of the biggest things that came out of the 2016 kind of autopsy of the 2016 election and the Russian disinformation campaigns, was their level and grasp of understanding of American culture in order for them to be effective with their campaigns just like blows ours out of the water when it comes to like American understanding of like in-depth culture of other countries for the most part. Okay, so last two were both real, 5 and 6. The last one, yes, InfoWars was purchased by The Onion. They are planning to relaunch it as a parody of itself, which I think is just amazing. There's so much opportunity there. But I think as of today, as of the day we're recording this, which is May 1st, the Texas Appeals Court paused the deal and wants it to go to the Texas Supreme Court. So more delays, but yeah, it's continuing to move forward, and I can't wait to see what they do with that if they get it passed through. And then the last one, yes, according to New Republic, Orban lost on April 12th. His party collapsed from a supermajority down to 55 seats out of 199. It was the highest turnout election in Hungary since the fall of communism. The day of the election, before results were in, CPAC posted a statement that read, "We stand firmly with Prime Minister Viktor Orban and the Hungarian people as they vote. He is a true example of a leader with strong conservative values." Orban lost that night. The next morning, the winner, Peter Magyar, held a press conference and told reporters that Orban had been routing Hungarian taxpayer money to CPAC. He called it, direct quote, "a crime. Mixing party financing with government spending from the state budget is, in my view, a criminal offense." It's worth noting that Snopes has run a fact check and flagged this as still under investigation. The claim has been made, but they haven't produced any documentation yet. So, it's an allegation at this moment, basically confirmed that what is not an allegation and is confirmed is that CPAC held their conference in Budapest 5 times and publicly backed Orban on election day. Matt Schlapp from CPAC was asked to respond to the funding allegations. According to MS Now, he did not deny payments. He said he was gratified that the new prime minister invited CPAC back to Budapest. And it is worth noting that J.D. Vance made a last-minute trip to Hungary right before the election, specifically to endorse Orban in person on behalf of the Trump administration. So that... Obviously, he lost, and if they were bankrolling the home conference, CPAC was holding up Orban's Hungary as the proof of concept for a liberal conservative governance. That proof of concept was just voted out by the people of Hungary. So that wraps up that. Any of those surprising, or did you guys already know most of those from the news?
The only thing I hadn't heard about, I think, was the Orban funding CPAC thing. That was new to me, but it sounded plausible. And it wouldn't be the first foreign government to fund our politicians. So not very shocking, honestly.
Yeah, I think I read like the headlines for that, but I did not know the details. So that's really interesting. And yeah, the Iranian student, I don't know. Yeah. It's hard to know what to believe, I guess, out of that. Because it's like they are put together very polished. It seems like experts doing the work. It does seem like young people are doing it too. So yeah, who knows?
Yeah, it is interesting, like the forms of propaganda that are being created, right? Like it's a new thing, right? Like new technologies, like enabling these types of things at a much faster speed. It is hard to know.
And like young people who grow up online, like the digital literacy is so quick these days too. Like, I don't know.
I was just thinking too, like if you make it a banger, like people are gonna watch it, like.
Yeah.
and it I think the thing about the Lego propaganda videos to me is like it highlights how much easier propaganda is when you have a subject that's easy to satirize and easy
Yeah.
to pull apart. Like the Pete Hegseth, like all the allegations of him just being kind of like a drunk asshole. They dig into that, right? They've got plenty of material, I guess, that makes it easy for them to make really engaging content that has that kernel of truth, if you will.
It makes me think about, I was going to say, Team America World Police walked so that the Iranian AI videos could fly. But it seems like the same kind of register they're hitting, like the same kind of tropes and everything.
Yeah,
But,
I would agree. Well, hey, do we want to jump into talking a little bit about the what's occurring with our voting legislation and rights here in America?
Heck yes. Yeah, gerrymandering is a real controversial topic right now, obviously with California and various states now redrawing maps. And so, yeah, the Voting Rights Act has come under scrutiny. Clarence Thomas gave a direct quote on the 29th here saying, "The court should have never interpreted Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act of 1965 to effectively give racial groups an entitlement to roughly proportional representation."
An entitlement.
So, yeah, I know they call it an entitlement. So yeah, it's, they're basically telling us who representation is for in the country. And I don't know, I guess, yeah, I just sat with that and I read up on this and wanted to give a little bit of history of the Voting Rights Act and connect it a bit to what's happening. And so, yeah, let's get into it. So, essentially the 15th Amendment was ratified in 1870 and guaranteed Black men the constitutional right to vote. But over the next 100 years or so, it was systematically strangled. There were poll taxes, there were literacy tests, violence at polling places, and really there were a lot of deterrents to ensure that that constitutional right was never becoming a reality. So in 1965, the Voting Rights Act, which we've talked about in other episodes, was pushed through for its own political reasons, had the effect of, having a plain acknowledgement with a right that enforced representation. Section 2 specifically prohibited states from drawing congressional maps designed to dilute the minority voting power. And the practice became known as gerrymandering. Politicians, drew lines around communities to ensure outcomes and choosing their voters instead of the voters choosing them. And so the Voting Rights Act really was the mechanism that tried to make the 15th Amendment look real. And it was totally gutted yesterday, Section 2, the gerrymandering. And, this comes from Louisiana, which was the state that had this case be challenged. Louisiana is 33% Black. And, after a 2020 census, Louisiana redrew its map. A federal court ruled that it violated Section 2 because it diluted the representation. Louisiana, compiled everything, completely redrew it. And for the first time in history, 2 Black Louisianians, I hope that's right, were sent to Congress. For the first time, 33%. Anyway, then a group identifying them, as non-Black voters immediately filed suit, and they claimed that, it's a complaint map drawn specifically to, their claim was that the compliant map was drawn and itself was a racial discrimination against them. And Supreme Court agreed perfectly along ideological lines, split 6-3. Alito wrote, for the majority, declaring Louisiana had been, quote, forced to engage in the very race-based discrimination that the Constitution forbids. Okay. So, they're kind of showing their hand here of who has representation, who doesn't. Of course, if you're wealthy, there's an entire infrastructure set up here with PACs and actually having direct lines of communication to these people in Congress, which is supposed to be about proportional representation. And if you're a Black person living in Louisiana and you represent 33% of the population, you don't get to have that congressperson who then is probably tied to the wealth circuit anyway. So it's an interesting thing. So that's kind of, what occurred. And the connection philosophically, I thought about Hannah Arendt, and she talks about political participation being not one right among many, but it is the, quote, precondition for all other rights. And without the political participation, you're just part of a political community, in name only, you're on a map, but you're absent from like the room where actual power decisions get made. And the wealthy do not need the Voting Rights Act. Their representation comes through capital and access and institutions, and they have strong interest in power. And so the VRA created a narrow, hard-won mechanism for communities who did not have that, whose only lever was voting. And they were already being kept out of it through various other means. So they removed that mechanism, essentially, and they're not creating neutrality. They're reversing the language of like race, and the Voting Rights Act era and the Civil Rights era, like that language is now being turned and used against us with like DEI, now this whole thing about representation. And it's a complete stunt, which connects to the last bit here, and it's that 1 hour after the ruling dropped of the Supreme Court decision 6-3, the Republican-controlled Florida House voted through an aggressively gerrymandered map. And so it's 1 hour, and the map was ready, it was waiting. It's not like governance, right? That's a political stunt, it's demonstration, and it's showing you like visibly and immediately what they can like, put down our throats. And it's the whole Trump aesthetic of, stunt as policy, and the speed of it is just like flabbergasting. And it's just a performance it's a performance of dominance, I think, over like the whole governing logic, just showing us, what they can do. So that's, kind of what occurred, and would love to get your thoughts. My kind of question here posed was, America's claim is that, we're told through myth making and story building that the government derives its legitimacy from consent of the governed. So when the legal mechanism, that converts a community's population into political representation gets ruled unconstitutional, what is the community consenting to? And what does it mean that Clarence Thomas, the man that received millions in undisclosed gifts and RVs and vacations from Republican mega donors, who reached the Supreme Court through, the framework of inclusion that he's now trying to dismantle, he's the one drawing the line. What does that mean,
So two really quick things. One, you said it was Louisiana's 30% roughly Black population, right?
Yeah, I think it's 33.
So like I was just doing the math. Louisiana has 6 districts. So with two representatives that are Black, that's 33% representation. So we're saying like that was too much. Like, so now that's not equitable representation. Okay. Yeah, just checking there on that. And that was the first 2 that they've had like ever. Is that what you were saying at the beginning of that? Jeez.
Yeah.
Man, that is just ridiculous. Like I'm glad we're reading the book we're going to read next.
And the one after that, isn't your pick The New Jim Crow, Arthur?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, by Michelle Alexander, who
I think.
I learned went to my high school. I was just like, I was on my high school Wikipedia, and there's like a little famous thing because there was some director that went there, and then it was like, what? That can't be this. And then I clicked into it.
That's so cool.
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Louisiana sort of embodies both of these problems, the electoral representation problem and like the legacy of slavery and the Jim Crow era and prison labor. Is it still slave labor? That whole question. All this stuff takes place in Louisiana. You can still see incarcerated people working in fields with white men on horses standing nearby. Like, it's how much progress have we made when you look at specific places like this? And yeah, it's disgusting to see what little bit of democracy we have. I mean, I'm obviously a lot on the podcast talking about how much we're not a democracy, how we need to really raise our standards for what counts as the consent of the governed. as a baseline, just including more people in the process, actually. When 77 million people out of 340 million say, yes, we like this person, then that person runs the whole country. That's democracy. Like, it's a very low, like, I don't know, that's the whole propaganda, right? We believe we're in a democracy when we've been in an oligarchy this whole time that's aspiring towards democracy. And so the Voting Rights Act being like one of the little things we've gotten that have kind of brought us in that direction, to see that get gutted, it's really disheartening. Yeah, it's really disheartening. But it's taken place in this context of like fast change and everything. And part of what I'll get into with my good news segment is just the scale at which people are more and more aware of how fucked up everything is, and how general the feeling is that things need to change in a more inclusive, democratic, collaborative way. That this is all taking place at the same time. The travesties and those little moments of connection and hope that let us know that some different world is possible. But yeah, I think I'm just hoping that from the organizers' point of view, this is more fuel to the fire to like get people organized and to make change happen. Like the elite, the wealthy, the institutions that have governed us for so long, they're not necessarily on everybody's side. They're on the side of their rich buddies, Clarence Thomas and his vacation friends. So yeah, what do we as people do in response to stuff like this? How do we make our consent part of the process, sort of force that conversation to happen? And this is taking place. We're having this conversation on Mayday. Very appropriate, right? Because that's really how it happens. In the least violent way, this is how it happens. It's organizing workers and flexing that collective power that like, you need our labor to keep your systems going. Without the collective labor, your system falls apart. So the more we can organize around that basic principle, the more we can fix stuff like this. But I also like the Hannah Arendt part you brought in, is like participation being like, I can't remember the word you used, but it was like
It's
the
like a
prerequisite.
precondition, for all other rights. Yeah.
Right. Like you can't really talk about rights in and of themselves until everybody's participating in that conversation.
The other thing there that made me think about, Joe, like what are we doing? We are seeing more people getting involved in the political process. I think as of yesterday, Janet Mills suspended her campaign for Senate for Maine, and it looks like Graham Plattner is going to be the presumptive Democratic nominee. Schumer came out and endorsed him, despite the fact that Plattner has been calling for Schumer to be booted from the Senate like for most of his campaign. But like just listening to him, some people have been concerned, like thinking it's going to end up being another, what's his face from Pennsylvania?
Fetterman.
Yeah, another Fetterman situation. But I've listened to Plattner on a few different interviews, and he does come across as very genuine, and just like you can kind of see how his life has led him to the point he's at. And I'm hopeful that maybe, with the midterms, we get more people that are progressive and not necessarily the traditional candidates coming through into some of the different seats, right? I think that there is an opportunity there too. And then having those people continue to champion the class that they're coming from, I guess. One of the things that he mentioned when he was talking to Jon Stewart, or Jon Stewart asked him, like, "Why are you afraid of being like pulled into this system and churned up by the system?" He's like, "Yeah, absolutely. Like, how can you not be when you're that disconnected from the everyday, after however long some of our politicians have been in there?" But that's the only other thing I just want to mention. I think that's good coming from bad, I guess, if that makes sense.
Nice. I was going to say about Maine too, that there was a recent challenge to Citizens United that actually grants some legitimacy to like a real track to get rid of it. And Oregon's going to be up next. So there is some hope there. And also I fact checked the Louisiana representations, and it says in the article that it's for the first time since Reconstruction 2 Black Louisianians were sent to Congress simultaneously.
Got it. That's awesome. Yeah, and also just as a fun little aside, what is it? We're recording this on May 1st. So yesterday was not only the day that Louisiana suspended their active primaries, right, because of this ruling, so that they could try and get another map in. But in history, that was the same day as the Louisiana Purchase and when Hitler killed himself. So all three of those things have happened on the same day. Please stay tuned for a word from our sponsors.
You ever notice how your friends stop listening to you like the third time you bring up the same problem?
Food prices are getting really high. I'd love to spend less time in restaurants and more time preparing meals together.
Totally. We should just go get coffee and drinks instead. I love a good beverage conflab.
Remember when you tried explaining your debt situation to a friend last week and he literally said, "I cannot hear about this again"?
My savings account has an interest rate of 0.01%. I'm basically lending the bank my money for free so they can turn around and charge me almost 25% interest on my credit card balance.
I literally cannot hear about this again.
You know who is never going to judge you?
So that's why I gotta listen, pal.
The stuffed animal therapist thing?
Yeah, he's my bestie bear. He lives in my car and I tell him whatever's on my mind. Stress, regrets, debt, political stuff.
That bear listens.
I tried it last night, told it everything. Student loans, my spending habits, my thoughts about the election.
That's healthy.
Honestly, it felt great. Although this morning I started getting ads for debt consolidation. Then I got an email asking if I'd like to, quote, clarify my political position.
That's probably unrelated.
That bear listens. Veritas Press. It's nice knowing someone's listening.
Since we are talking about Bernays on these episodes the last couple weeks, we hit on, some of the things that he did early, well, not necessarily early in his career, but in his career around like the Torches of Freedom campaign to, promote cigarette smoking for women, how he would get doctors to endorse hearty meals for bacon, like how he would, be a proponent of basically putting on a stunt or a show to drum up conversation around a product or something that he was trying to sell, essentially. And I think we didn't talk about it on the show just because we weren't recording at the time, but Trump did a recent stunt with a DoorDash driver. I don't know if you guys saw that, but he ordered DoorDash to the White House, and then like the driver came up and got out of the car and like he was like talking to them. We'll talk about this stunt a little bit more, but this is what made me think about it, right? Like he's done this a lot. And so before we even get into like the campaign years of kind of like stunts or myth making around Trump, we could just look back to like pre-political years. And, pre-political is in like no one thought he was going to be president, at that point probably. But, he was definitely getting pushed to run and to get more involved in politics for most of the time that he's been a public figure. And so we'll start in 1987, with The Art of the Deal, the book that, the big book that, is Trump's namesake and whatnot. So most of this is coming from the Wikipedia, and then also an article from PBS Frontline. There was an interview with Tony Schwartz. So in 1987, a book called Trump, The Art of the Deal hit #1 on New York Times bestseller list, where it stayed for 13 weeks and remained on the list for 48 weeks total. The book presented Trump as a genius dealmaker, blunt, decisive, and brilliant under pressure. The problem, according to PBS's Frontline interview with Tony Schwartz, the actual author, Trump played almost no role in writing it. Schwartz spent 18 months shadowing Trump, did all the interviews, and wrote essentially every word. He later told The Hollywood Reporter his biggest takeaway from the experience was that Trump was, quote, obsessed with his publicity and did not care what you wrote. The book also coined the phrase truthful hyperbole, which Schwartz described as Trump's philosophy for exaggeration as a marketing tool. It's in the book. Trump loved it. So the Bernays angle that, might get missed with this, the book launch itself was a PR stunt. According to the Wikipedia article on the book on September 2nd, 1987, working with his publicist Dan Klores and Roger Stone, Trump ran full-page ads in major newspapers attacking Washington for spending American taxpayer money defending allies overseas. His publicist, Klores, later said, quote, he didn't run, but it was probably the greatest book promotion of all time. He manufactured a political moment to sell a book. That's not an author, it's a propagandist. So that was, like just the book starting kind of the myth of Trump, really, in a lot of ways. In 1989, that was when he bought the ad for the Central Park 5. And so this was reported in Time magazine. Less than 2 weeks after Central Park jogger was attacked in April 1989, Trump spent $85,000 of his own money to take out full-page ads in 4 New York newspapers. The Times, the Daily News, the Post, and Newsday. The ads called for reinstatement of the death penalty. According to Time magazine's history of the case, a legal team member said Trump, quote, poisoned the minds of the people who lived in New York. The 5 teens were convicted. They served between 6 and 13 years in prison. In 2002, DNA and evidence exonerated all 5. Trump has never apologized. As late as 2019, he was still saying, quote, they admitted their guilt. They hadn't. They were coarse confessions from teenagers. And, the PR angle or read kind of on that is, he didn't take out the ads for like legal expertise or legal reasons. He did it because he understood nothing builds like a tough guy persona or brand faster than being loud on crime, right? And so that was, again, building to his public identity that he was. From 1988 to 2007, Trump actually did a lot of different work with WrestleMania and WWE, and he kind of had like a heel personality there. And we've talked about this a little bit on our show. And Behind the Bastards, I'm going to recommend them again for their Vince McMahon episodes. They did like a 6-parter on Vince McMahon that really goes deep into just wrestling, professional wrestling in general, talks about things like kayfabe and like all the different stunts that they use in promotion within wrestling itself. And like connecting those two things is helpful in understanding like Trump, the entertainer, and how he kind of like came up and his interactions with the WWE, and specifically like him learning about kayfabe. Everything is real, right? Everything is real to everybody else, and you can't break it, right? You have to maintain that image.
Can you unpack what kayfabe is?
Yeah. So kayfabe is essentially the practice of presenting all the staged things as real. Like, so when they're fighting, right, in the ring, we might know that this is not a real thing, but kayfabe is essentially holding that act and not breaking character and pretending and presenting this as this is a real thing, even, backstage, to the point where, like, if they had, and they go into this a lot in the Behind the Bastards episode, but if people were fighting in WWE, like they had a beef or something, they weren't supposed to be like seen outside at like friendly together. Like that would destroy the kayfabe. That would destroy the story that they're selling. So that's what it is. It's like taking it to that next level of like, oh no, we're committing to the bit like fully, if that makes sense.
Gotcha.
And so like after that, I mean, the next big thing that Trump was involved in was The Apprentice from 2004 to 2015. In January 2020, so this is mostly from Fortune magazine and Washington Post here. In January 2004, The Apprentice debuted on NBC to 18 million viewers. The season finale drew 28 million. According to Fortune, the show rescued Trump's brand at a moment when his businesses were teetering. Multiple casino bankruptcies, mounting debt, a brand that had started to look tardy even by New York tabloid standards. What the show actually was, according to a former producer writing in Slate, was a carefully constructed fiction. The boardroom scenes were edited to make Trump seem sharp and decisive. Racist and misogynist comments were cut from the footage. The brilliant businessman character was manufactured post-production. Trump told the Washington Post, quote, I do have great feelings for people, but I become more popular by being on a show where I fire people. It's weird. And then he added, this is the key line, Michael Douglas said I'm the best actor on television. I said, I'm not acting. This is who I am. Pop culture expert Robert Thompson put it plainly in the Christian Science Monitor, if The Apprentice had never happened, I don't think Donald Trump would be where he is right now politically. The show ran for 14 seasons and earned Trump nearly $200 million directly, but the real return on investment wasn't money, it was the character. By 2015, when he descended the escalator to announce his candidacy, over a decade of NBC primetime had conditioned 20 million Americans a week to see Donald Trump as a decisive, powerful, legitimate authority figure. So it's not just in this case, like you could think of, oh, this is like branding, but it's also manufacturing consent in a lot of ways of like turning this person into someone that you feel like you can trust because you watch them on TV every day making these really decisive decisions, right? So before we go into kind of like the political stunts and everything, that brings us up to, 2014, 2015 time frame. Any thoughts on just like this and the question that I'll ask, right? Like, is there really a difference between building a brand, building an image through public relations because you want to be a successful business person and make money in entertainment versus like the type of political propaganda, like those same techniques that are being used prior to any political direct political involvement, transfer is what I'm saying. So it's like using that same methodology for his own business brand that he then transfers over to, using in the political sphere. So any thoughts before I kind of talk about the political stunts that he's pulled?
Trying to formulate a funny question based on your last comment, because you're talking about transferable skills. And I was thinking, what does it say about our political system when a transferable skill set from WWE showman maps on directly to the highest office in the land and gets him there?
Right. But I mean,
it's a spectacle. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, then that's kind of the point, right? Like, he spent all these years building up a personal image and brand and whatnot that this kind of gets into almost like great man theory versus just what's the opposing theory? Just I can't remember the name of it, but generally that's how we were going anyway. Like, did Trump really invent this, or was he just the perfect person at the time that had the right audience and no moral compass to take advantage of where we were going politically?
I mean, it's a I don't know. It feels like a very American tradition politically in a lot of ways. This whole great man spectacle. I mean, you can even think of George Washington, like all the myth making about him. His teeth weren't wood; they were enslaved people's teeth that they stole from other humans and made a set for George. But we all think he had wooden teeth for some reason. I don't know. They're just weird stories that we learn about these leaders and stuff, and this whole great man way of telling history. And Trump understands it on an intuitive level. He understands how to play the part, and I think he really tries to convince himself that that is his identity. Very psychopathic stuff.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I was just thinking how it's like he's showing us who he is before, even getting to the stage. Like, it's all here. It's all well documented. We just, as a society, I don't know. His PR is very good.
He definitely has like that intuitive, he gets people, right? He understands what makes people angry or the buttons to push, right? Like, he definitely understands that. And he definitely understands the be the loudest in the room, or the call to authority and having others speak on your behalf, right? Like, I don't even mention it in any of this, but he's like, I think we talked about it a couple episodes ago, where he literally calls in under fake names, like John Barron, to news programs to talk about himself and promote himself. And he's done that since the 80s. Like, like that shit, like, that's just always been there. Moving past the pre-political stunts, going into kind of like the big ones that have happened in his first and second term. The Escalator stunt from when he announced his running in the first place. This is from the Hollywood Reporter, June 16, 2015. Trump and Melania descended a golden escalator in the lobby of Trump Tower to a crowd of cheering supporters. Cameras framed perfectly. The shot is magnificent. The crowd is enormous and enthusiastic. The Hollywood Reporter broke the story the next day that a casting company called Extra Mile had been hired to fill the crowd with paid actors at $50 each. The FEC later confirmed it. The event organizer told Business Insider, quote, "The event was really our brainchild. The most famous escalator ride in the history of politics was that one. The event wasn't organic. It was a production." And the genius of it is, within 2 minutes, Trump had called Mexican immigrants rapists and murderers, and that became the story. The paid actors, the stage crowd, the Hollywood casting call, all of it was completely drowned out, and every network cut live to his speech, and every network stayed on it. I mean, you can think about the impact of this. Through February of 2016, Trump received almost $2 billion in free media attention, twice the amount that Hillary Clinton had received. He earned $400 million in free media in February alone. The free media claim is basically just the amount of time that the media spends on him as a spectacle, right, versus other candidates, right? Because he gets clicks, he gets people listening. So that's what we're talking about when we say free media. So he didn't even need to buy it. He just knew that if it was kind of ridiculous enough and drive enough attention to himself, that he was going to get coverage way more than any other candidate by being, himself. So after he was actually elected, right, like he's also done this one multiple times. McDonald's is just a reoccurring character in this story. He did the Clemson fast food dinner. I think you guys remember that after they won the national championship. January 2019, the government was shut down, and the Clemson Tigers visited the White House after winning the national championship. Standard protocol would have been a formal state dinner. Trump instead served McDonald's, Wendy's, and Burger King and Domino's on silver platters in the White House. There's a couple others here that I think people are aware of, like the Sharpie gate, when he basically would just not refuse to comment on the path of the hurricane and decided to add another ring with a Sharpie, just saying like that could go that direction. The one I do want to talk about a little bit more is the mugshot, right? So in August 24th, 2023, Trump becomes the first former U.S. president to be booked at a county jail. Inmate number P011358809. The Fulton County mugshot is taken and does it in a defiant glare that, he then uses on merchandising equipment. Basically, he took this, what could have been a negative thing, and completely reverses it, right? And uses it for promotion, right? I actually didn't know about this one until I started looking into it, but did you guys know that he launched a sneaker brand? So February 17th, 2024, this is from ABC News, Trump appears at SneakerCon in Philadelphia, a sneaker culture convention, to launch Never Surrender high-top gold sneakers at $3.99 a pair. He takes the stage to a crowd of sneakerheads, pumping his fist and signs shoes. He was facing roughly $500 million in legal expenses at the time, and the sneakers were licensed through an entity called Kick Ventures LLC, Commander-in-Chief Ventures, which runs all of Trump's branded merchandise. Yeah. So, and I mean, he's done other, he puts his name on everything. Like, that's not new news, right? Stakes and whatever schools that have all gone on out. So, but yeah, while he's, running for president again, launches sneakers. I think we remember this one, the God Bless the USA Bible. On March 2024, which was Good Friday, Trump releases a promotional video for the God Bless the USA Bible. The Bible endorsed by Donald Trump, featuring King James text alongside the Constitution, Bill of Rights, Declaration of Independence, and the Pledge of Allegiance. $59.99, he says on camera. All Americans need a Bible in their home, and I have many. It's my favorite book. In 2016, he called 2 Corinthians 2 Corinthians at a campaign event and couldn't name a favorite verse. The Bible made him $300,000 in royalties. And then we'll get into a couple of my favorites, which I'm going to read out of order from chronologically here. So in October 2024, this was when he did his McDonald's cook fry stunt, if you guys remember that one. So that was in Feasterville, Pennsylvania, swing area in northeast Philadelphia. 2 weeks before Election Day, Trump dons an apron over his suit and tie and drops a basket of fries into the fryer and works the drive-thru. The restaurant was closed to the public for the entire event. According to NBC News, the customers who came through the drive-thru were pre-selected by the franchise and the local Trump campaign team. Their cars were screened and searched, they were wanded down, and according to The Nation, they even did a rehearsal runs through the drive-thru in advance. The whole thing was designed to troll Kamala Harris, who had talked about working at a McDonald's as a college student. Trump had been calling her a liar about it for weeks without any evidence, and after his shift, he told reporters, "I worked 15 minutes longer than Kamala Harris ever did." So the impact from this stunt, right? Obviously the images went viral. Trump was in an apron, salting fries, going through the drive-thru. And what was it? Piers Morgan called it not just hilariously funny, but a powerful connective link to regular voters. The franchise owner had fought minimum wage increases and faced repeated labor protests. Nobody ended up covering that. So another funny comment I heard about this stunt was actually from the Pod Save America guys. I'll actually hit that after I hit the DoorDash one. So second to last one we're going to talk about is the DoorDash stunt. This was one of the more recent ones that occurred. So this was in 2025. So the target emotion here, this was supposedly a stunt for the no tax on tips policy that he had put out initially. So this was back in the White House. This is his second term. Trump staged a McDonald's delivery to the White House by a DoorDasher to celebrate his no tax on tips policy. The other piece on this was Trump was basically asking them about trans women in sports, and the person's like, I'm here for tax on tips, and didn't really engage in that culture war piece. So yeah, loves McDonald's for his stunts. Okay, the very last one that I'm going to read about is actually took place while he was still on the campaign trail, and this was the Butler fist bump. So on Trump's second assassination attempt, is this the first assassination attempt? I think was Butler. Then there was the guy down at Doral, and then it was this most recent one at the White House dinner, which I think actually makes Trump the number one for attempted assassinations. Like someone actually had a gun is in the proximity. I think. I don't know. I was looking that up. But anyway, yeah, so this was Butler. So this is from CNN and the Wikipedia article on this. July 13th, 2024, Butler, Pennsylvania. A bullet grazes Trump's ear during a campaign rally. He drops behind the podium. Secret Service rushes the stage. When the agents begin escorting him off, Trump tells them to wait. He rises slowly, blood on his face, turns to the crowd, and pumps his fist in the air. He mouths the words, "Fight, fight, fight." AP photographer Evan Vucci captures the shot, a bloodied Trump, fist raised, American flag waving behind him, agents surrounding him. Within hours, it's the most shared political image in years. According to CNN's reporting, Trump later told close allies that he knew that in that moment he needed to leave supporters with a potent image. He had better political instincts than anyone I know, a campaign advisor said. The image was now printed on T-shirts, mugs, and signs within days. At nearly every rally after July 13th, that photo and the fight slogan were prominently displayed on the clothing his supporters wore, the merchandise being sold, and screens serving as the backdrops for his speeches. The photo is now hung in the west and east wings of the White House. Less than 48 hours later, Trump announced J.D. Vance as his VP pick. 3 days later, he appeared at the RNC wearing a white bandage on his ear. Biden withdrew from the race 4 days after that. And so I wanted to leave on that one because, there's a ton of conspiracy theories around, staged attempts against Trump or something like that, which honestly, I don't think hold a lot of weight. I think the stage, this is just my personal opinion. I don't think these are staged. I think that they have contingencies in place that they are going to react with if a certain thing happens. So I legitimately think if an assassination attempt happens, here's all the messaging we're going to go with on this. I think that's more likely what they've kind of prepped. But again, that's just my personal opinion here. But wanted to stop on this one because it's if this wasn't staged and that really was Trump, hey, we need, if that was him in his own mental facilities to decide to stand up and do that in that scenario, you got to give it credit to him because he does know what works well and what is going to sell and promote his brand and image. So that's all I wanted to kind of talk about. I want to talk about all his different stunts. This doesn't cover all of them. This is kind of just some of the big hits, but you could spend a lot more time digging into promotions, things that Trump is selling out of the White House. We didn't even hit on cryptocurrency or anything that he's done in there. But yeah, just wanted to get your guys' thoughts on this with the backdrop of Bernays and what we've been talking about this week.
It's the guy, he understands it and he's in the position to exploit it to its fullness. And it's sad that that's the person in charge. The person we need in charge is the person who doesn't want to be in charge. This guy just wants to rule everything and have a say in everything and a finger in every pie.
That's funny. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I feel part of me thinks that with a person with Trump psychology, emotionally fragile silver spoon baby who's had everything handed to him his whole life, even daddy's limo that he used to drive around New York in and act like it was his. It's this person who's spent his whole life just assuming everybody's watching him constantly. And of course, that person has the instincts in that moment to remember that people are still watching. And he doesn't want to look weak, crouched on a stage, let me give them a strong image. The stage is, he'd practiced with WWE at that point. He knew what a stage was for. And so, in his psychological situation, that podium area is probably very much like a WWE stage. I don't think he views those situations differently at all. But I'm just thinking that the most harmful thing we could do to him is probably starve him of attention and just completely, whenever possible, stop paying attention to him and stop acting like his decisions matter. And I don't know. It's hard to do when he holds all the power right now. So we kind of have to talk about it in the meantime. But I think that would hurt him the most, is just for people to stop talking about him and stop caring about him. I don't really have a strong opinion about whether the assassination attempts are real or fake. I do think it's a little suspect how conveniently this recent one gives them legal cover to push ahead with the stupid ballroom stuff.
Right.
But yeah, that guy, Cole Allen Thomas, is he a 3-name guy, Cole Allen Thomas, that shooter? He seems legitimately like an aggravated person who wanted to take action into his own hands. So,
yeah.
But yeah, I think what you're saying, if they're really thinking ahead and understanding that all these things are possible, whether they're real or fake, they're assuming they might happen at some point, and so they have a plan in place for how to pivot the narrative and capitalize on the moment and all this stuff. I largely agree with that take. Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I'm just tired of talking about Trump, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's about like how they're using the optics of this, and like, you know, it's about the political timing and optics and exploiting it and how their reactions are. And just as an aside, I saw that this latest White House shooter, the first thing that happened was Facebook and Instagram took down his photo where he's like praising and pointing to an IDF, like you know, whatever, Israeli flag, and he's like some IDF stuff. So it's pretty interesting that like that's what they want to disappear from the narrative. Meanwhile, APAC is like the #1 pack in America.
They've been taking some L's recently, though.
Yeah.
So
With all the
speaking.
Jesus statues that they're like, have you seen those photos? They're like just statues of like Jesus, and they're beheaded, and they're just like, ha ha, like what?
Yeah, that's bad for American politics for sure.
Yeah.
Kodie, earlier you were going to quote something from the Pod Save America guys about Trump, and I think maybe you forgot to circle back to that quote.
Yeah, I think about the McDonald's, right? Like Pod Save America.
Oh, that's right. So what they were saying was they were comparing the DoorDash quote or the DoorDash stunt to the McDonald's stunt. And like saying like, or which one's more effective. And I can't remember who said it, but it was basically like the McDonald's stunt was more effective because Trump didn't talk. Like, so it was just like images of an old man, like giving people food from the McDonald's, and the DoorDash one, he immediately just jumps into like trans stuff. And the person's like, this makes me uncomfortable. So, like, yeah, if you can just not have him talk, that's preferable.
I also appreciated just the highlight reel of all, like, as much as I hate talking about Trump, like one of the most frustrating things about him is how funny he is. And a lot of these silly moments he does are just end up being really, really funny. And I was thinking about second term near the beginning when him and Elon were still on good terms. They did all those weird used car commercial type things at the White House with Elon's cars. Those
right.
were top notch, hilarious, just clown shit, in my opinion.
Love those. He was carrying around like the sheet with like the Tesla stuff, and he was reading them. He didn't understand them. He got in and he goes, it's all computer.
Just to kind of close out this conversation around Trump and stunts and the PR aspect of it, I did want to talk a little bit more about the people behind Trump, because like Trump obviously has some pretty decent instincts when it comes to public relations and how to control narrative and whatnot. And so like, how did he get it? So I'm going to talk through a little bit about the people behind Trump and kind of like who he learned from. And there's a lot of good documentaries and like actual movies that you can watch related to this. But, you know, the originators with Roy Cohn, Roger Stone, and Paul Manafort. That's kind of like the foundation for the guys that created Trump in the beginning. So this is mostly coming from Wikipedia and NPR and Slate. The foundation is, like I mentioned, it's Roy Cohn, who was Joe McCarthy's chief counsel, New York fixer, and mentor to both Trump and Roger Stone in the late 70s. Cohn taught Trump two things: how to weaponize press relationships, and that you never apologize, never retreat, always attack harder when you are hit. Cohn once said that Trump was as close to a genius as anyone in this country. Their relationship lasted until Cohen's death from AIDS in 1986, and Trump was one of the people who abandoned him at the end. Roger Stone connected to both of them and built the architecture. Stone's firm, Black, Manafort, and Stone, had Trump as its first client. Stone spent 30 years trying to get Trump to run for president. He describes himself on camera as an agent provocateur. The New York's Jeffrey Tobin wrote flatly that Stone created Donald Trump as a political figure and that the Trump presidency was a pure Roger Stone production. Stone brought Nixon's doctrine into Trump's playbook: attack, never defend, turn every accusation into a weapon. Paul Manafort is kind of the international dimension. So Stone's partner, later Trump's 2016 campaign manager, Manafort had spent years running political messaging for authoritarian regimes in Ukraine and elsewhere. He literally wrote the book for making strong men palatable to Western audiences, then brought it home. And he eventually went to prison. But by then, the foundation was already laid. So Stone, Manafort, both have got pardons from Trump in the first campaign. By August 2016, Trump's campaign was in trouble, and Trump brought in two people for the final stretch who, between them, represented two completely different propaganda vectors. Kellyanne Conway was a veteran GOP pollster, data messaging, and specifically with female voters. She understood which emotional frequencies to hit in which voters and in which states. She's the person who engineered the electoral college strategy that won Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. She gave the chaos an operational backbone. While Steve Bannon was the executive chairman of Breitbart and had spent 20 years as what NPR Joshua Green described as a professional anti-Clinton operative. But more importantly, Bannon understood the internet's raw political energy, the forums, the meme culture, the alt-right information ecosystem, in a way no traditional political operative did. He understood that the fringe was the leading edge. And then there's Cambridge Analytica, the data firm that Bannon himself had a stake in, which profiled tens of millions of American voters by psychological type and used the data to micro-target emotional messaging. This isn't Bernays manufacturing mass consent. It's Bernays individualized, automated, and scaled to 150 million people. The result was that from July 2015 through August 2016, Trump received free media worth more than $5.9 billion. Clinton received less than half of that. Trump spent $398 million on his campaign. Clinton spent $768 million. He outperformed her financially while spending half as much because the stunts replaced the ad budget. The digital operation, you guys might have not have heard of him before. Dan Scavino. Have you heard of Dan Scavino? I hadn't really heard much about him. I think I'd heard the name, but before looking into this. But he is in some ways the most important person in Trump's communication operations that no one really talks about. He met Trump as a 14-year-old caddy at a Trump golf club in Westchester. He worked for Trump for decades before joining the 2016 campaign as the social media director. Scavino is the person who managed Trump's Twitter and later Truth Social account across all three campaigns in both terms. Political reported in 2017 that he often taps out tweets for the president's account as Trump dictates them. He mimicked Trump's voice so precisely for so long that it's genuinely unclear where Scavino ends and where Trump begins online. In the second term, he's been elevated to Deputy Chief of Staff, one of the most powerful positions in the White House. The man who runs the president's social media feed now oversees the entire White House personnel office. That tells you everything you need to know about how seriously this administration takes digital communication as governance. And then we get into kind of the super PAC dark money operation portions of this. This is mostly from Axios and Washington Examiner, but Taylor Budowich is less famous, but arguably more important in the second term than Bannon or Conway. He founded MAGA Inc., a primary pro-Trump super PAC, and its companion dark money nonprofit Securing American Greatness, which doesn't have to disclose its donors. Together, they raised and spent more than $600 million during the 2024 campaign. He ran the outside money machine that flooded the airwaves with pro-Trump messaging while the campaign itself stayed lean. Budowich came into the second term White House as Deputy Chief of Staff, overseeing communications, cabinet affairs, and speechwriting, essentially the entire message operation. He departed in September 2025 to return to the private sector, which means he's now back in the outside world running private PR and probably setting up the next super PAC infrastructure for the midterms. What's important about the MAGA Inc. structure is that it industrialized the propaganda operation. It's no longer just Trump's instincts and stone-stirring tricks. It's a $600 million institutional infrastructure with dark money, data operations, and messaging shops working in coordination. The second term meme operations. So this is mostly from CNN NBC. In the second term, the official White House communications operations has been restructured around content creation in a way that has no precedent. According to CNN NBC News, the White House Deputy Communications Director, Kayleen Dorr, works directly with Trump and Dan Scavino on the creative process of meme strategy. He previously ran the social media operation for Getter, the right-wing Twitter alternative. What the White House has done is essentially become its own media production company. According to CNN, official White House accounts that have shared AI-generated images of Trump as the Pope, as Superman, as a Jack Star Wars character wielding a red lightsaber. They've depicted border czar Tom Homan as the Teletubbies' son rising over the border wall. When Politico asked for comment, the White House responded with a meme referencing Mad Men. Stephen Chung, the White House communications director, has posted from his personal X account calling California Governor Gavin Newsom a beta cuck and that account will eventually become part of official government archives. The White House has added over 18 million new followers across platforms since Inauguration Day. They launched a TikTok account despite laws against TikTok on federal devices and gained 177,000 followers in 24 hours. One former Democratic digital operative told NBC News that the White House is doing online is, quote, trolling for the sake of trolling, throwing toxic sludge out there and trying to gin up reactions. The White House's response, nowhere in the Constitution does it say we can't post banger memes. All right. And then the last level of this that you always have to talk about when you're talking about the propaganda system is the media machine beyond the White House and where that support comes from. Obviously, Rupert Murdoch and Fox News, who previously wanted Trump to become a non-person after the January 6th, but whose network instead rallied behind him and whitewashed the Capitol attack. Tucker Carlson, before he left, was the single most powerful amplifier of the MAGA narrative on cable television. And he is now saying that he regrets misleading the Americans with Trump. So that's an interesting turn there. Already mentioned it, but Breitbart and Steve Bannon's War Room. Bannon was removed from the White House in 2017, but kept running the information operation from the outside. His podcast War Room became the most listened to political podcast in America during the 2020 to 2024 campaign cycle, coordinating messaging with grassroots base in a way the official campaign couldn't. We've talked a lot about this, but obviously Elon Musk and X, Musk's $288 million donation to Trump's campaign and his control of the platform Trump uses most heavily is arguably the single biggest new variable in the second term. Musk didn't just donate, he restructured the algorithm of the world's most politically influential social media platform in a way that amplifies right-wing content. The propaganda infrastructure and distribution platform are now owned by the same political coalition. Alex Bushwitz and X Strategies runs the Trump War Room and @Team Trump accounts separately from the White House. According to CNN, he describes the second-term social media shop as one that mirrors the president more closely than the first term. What you're looking at is not a PR team. It's an ecosystem. Stone laid the philosophical foundation. Bannon built the internet insurgency. Conway and Budowich professionalized the money and messaging, and Scavino digitized the candidate's voice. Musk owns the pipelines, and the White House content studio produces the daily material that flows through them all simultaneously. And we saw an example of this immediately following the attack the attempted assassination at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, when within a couple minutes, as you guys mentioned, Trump's talking about a White House, and all of the right-wing influencers are also blasting out the same message that this is why we need a ballroom, right? That type of coordination that goes on in that ecosystem is laid pretty clear when those messages go out. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of close out on that. You know, Bernays said, you don't win people's minds with facts and arguments. You win by manufacturing an emotional reality that they want to live in. You identify the desires they already have and give them a symbol to attach those desires to. And Trump figured that out. I just wanted to kind of close out on this conversation with some of the individuals that are performing some of this work and putting up some of these different stunts or promoting the stunts online posts.
It's like, fascinating to see behind the curtain who owns what pipeline within the industry. Kind of terrifying that it's become an industry, and when it's going to capitulate and Trump, leaves office or whatever, and how it's going to keep going. But it's really interesting to get a look behind the curtain.
Yeah, I agree. And you said the curtain. Yeah, just thinking of that metaphor, the Wizard of Oz thing, the big scary guy on the screen, and then you pull the curtain back, and it's just frail old man. But then, like with Trump, it's like what you've been detailing recently, Kodie. It's like this whole crowd of people, of enablers, just crowded around him. Like, what is he saying? What are we doing? What are we doing? We're just taking notes and enabling every little whim he has. And that's what's going on behind the curtain. Is all these enablers making it possible, building the infrastructure and capitalizing on their proximity to power. It's gross. Yeah. It's like we used to talk about common values or shared values. I think that's a phrase you used early in the podcast. But yeah, like what are these people's values? What is the point of all this, if not just power for power's sake? They don't have some aggressive policy agenda that's uplifting people or accomplishing better living conditions, or it's war, it's power, it's control, it's gutting Voting Rights Act, it's gutting SNAP and welfare benefits, and now maybe SSI for disability. for people with disabilities. Like these are the values.
Yeah.
It's gross. Yeah.
No, I think you hit it on the head. That's the shared value for them. It is the power, right? It's money. Money means to end, which is power, like, and making sure they're not losing that however possible. So we need to have better shared values on our side.
Welcome to the future of sound design. Obey introduces the Harmony Pods, the only programmable voice cancellation system engineered to be the ultimate defense against distraction and privacy breaches.
My workflow used to be constantly destroyed by my coworker, but now I put in my pods, calibrate the filter to his voice, and immediately he is tuned out and I can finally focus.
The Harmony Pods are a revolutionary workplace management tool. Our optimized discretion feature allows management to remotely filter themselves in the pods of any employee, guaranteeing internal corporate privacy without disrupting the physical workflow.
Just last week, the CEO and CFO were having a tense side discussion in the middle of a big meeting. All of a sudden, my pods filtered their voices out completely. When they were done, they flipped the switch and the meeting resumed.
Experience the freedom of filtering. Privacy is no longer a problem. It's a setting.
Harmony Pod users may fail to perceive auditory warnings, emergency signals, or distress calls originating from any source being filtered by the optimized discretion feature. So, I guess we kind of ended the last segment on shared values, and that's kind of a good segue to talk about Mayday and the power of collective action, of everyday people and workers to come together and improve their conditions. I'm going to share a brief segment from today's Democracy Now! Broadcast, which is about Mayday, so just a general update on Mayday across the world.
democracynow.org. I'm Amy Goodman in Boston. Juan Gonzalez is in Chicago. Workers around the world are rallying today to mark Mayday, International Workers' Day. In the Philippines, thousands of activists rallied earlier today in Manila, calling for higher wages and an end to the U.S. and Israeli war on Iran.
At first, you might think there's no connection. But as we saw when the war in the Middle East broke out, crude oil and gasoline prices shoot up. There's a domino effect. Prices increase across the board. Gasoline prices rose by more than 100%, leaving our jeepney driver colleagues with very little income. Many of them no longer want to go out and drive because they can't earn enough.
In Argentina, thousands of workers rallied in Buenos Aires Thursday ahead of Mayday to condemn the economic and labor policies of Argentina's far-right president, Javier Milei.
Unfortunately, today in Argentina, the economic situation and the economic plan being carried out by Javier Milei's government are seriously affecting the situation of all workers, which deteriorates more year after year. People are very angry, very dissatisfied, and they will make that demand felt by taking to the streets of Buenos Aires and the rest of the cities across all Argentine provinces.
In our last segment, we're going to talk with an investigative reporter about her work in India on a people's history of invisible India. But here in the United States, organizers with the Mayday Strong Coalition say 3,000 protests and events are scheduled for today, with organizers calling for no school, no work, no shopping. On Thursday, Democracy Now! Spoke with Neddy Dominguez, founding executive director of Organized Power in Numbers and organizer with the Mayday Strong Coalition.
And so we're standing up to say that in this country, really, the billionaires are the only ones that are profiting and benefiting from our harm. And tomorrow, May 1st, to celebrate International Workers' Day and stepping up for all workers in the country, we're calling for taxing the rich so our families, not their fortunes, come first. We're calling for no ICE, no war, and no private armies to serve an authoritarian government and power, and to expand our democracy, not a corporate rule.
We're joined now by two guests. In Los Angeles, Pedro Trujillo, the organizing director at the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights and the coordinator of the LA Mayday Coalition. And in Chicago, where Juan is also, Stacey Davis Gates, president of the Chicago Teachers Union, president of the Illinois Federation of Teachers. We're going to begin with Pedro in the streets of Los Angeles. If you can talk about the organizing that's going on in Los Angeles. Last July, immigration agents in SWAT gear and armored vehicles descended on MacArthur Park, where the largest planned rally is happening today. Can you talk about the scale of ICE activity now and the particularly targeting of workers as we discuss this on International Workers' Day?
Good morning. And we were just a few hours away from our major demonstration here in MacArthur Park. And as you said, we are standing on the ground that was utilized as a space to intimidate the community just over 6 months ago, close to a year ago, here in MacArthur Park, where Bovino and company descended on MacArthur Park while kids were out here in the park playing. And we have not seen the scale or operations that we were seeing in the summertime and up until the end of last year, but they're still operating in our communities on a day-to-day basis. We're still hearing stories of family separation, of cruelty, and a lot of cruelty in the detention center still. And so that's why we're bringing our group together. That's why we see such a strong coalition coming together, over 120 organizations and unions here in Los Angeles endorsing this march. We haven't seen this level of support, of engagement in a very long time. So I'm really hopeful that we are able to advance our demands, which is that we want no wars. We want education, healthcare funded instead of wars. We want citizenship for all. And we want that people's dignity and that their lives are actually valued, right? That they're not being taken as ways of making money off of people's bodies and their lives.
I'd like to bring into the conversation Stacey Davis Gates, president of the Illinois Federation of Teachers and of the Chicago Teachers Union. You're speaking here from Chicago, the birthplace of Mayday. Back in May 1st, 1886, thousands of workers in Chicago protested and went on strike demanding an 8-hour day. Could you talk about the efforts of your union to get the public schools to basically shut down so that students and parents and teachers could participate in May Day protests?
Thank you for that. Listen, in Chicago, our union is ran by high school history teachers. And so we thought it was necessary to wrap ourselves in the history of this great city and its interconnectedness to the workers' rights movement. 4 years after the Haymarket affair, our union was born. In order to make this holiday mean something to the families of this city, you have to speak to the young people and their parents. And so we were able to negotiate an agreement, a memorandum of understanding with the Chicago Public Schools to engage all of our children in teaching the truth about May Day and creating academic freedom for all of us to understand where our empowerment comes from. It comes from community. How do we practice it? With solidarity. And these are the most patriotic and American lessons that we can learn, especially on the 250th anniversary of this American story.
Actually going to stop it there because I think the conversation kind of veers into a different direction. I just kind of want to focus on some of the things that the president of the Chicago Teachers Union just said, about solidarity and sort of focusing on those elements as countermeasures to some of the cruelty we've been talking about previously in the episode. Is there anything that you guys want to comment on based on what we saw in that clip just now? Just thinking about interconnectedness, about how common the complaints seem to be, whether it's in the Philippines or Argentina or the streets of LA or Chicago, just sort of that global interconnectedness of the average working person right now.
Yeah, I think, we talked about it a lot, like this divide that they try to create and stratification between all of us. But when these global events happen, like, the mask comes off and we see that it's like, the few are controlling the events on the global, sphere, and we all suffer together. So, and it's definitely exploitative. It's capitalism reigning supreme as an economic policy. And that necessarily means that they need bodies to produce, and generate wealth for them. And so definitely. I love the practice of solidarity there and kind of like uncovering why we're all in this together and taking down those walls. And it's really not about like race or anything that's dividing us that they're trying to make a political stunt. It's really like it is a class warfare and we are supplying the means of their wealth and they're exploiting it.
Yeah, I really loved when they were talking about like working with their local schools to like educate on what Mayday is and the emphasis on like the younger generations. Like I mean, intuitively it makes sense, right? Because those are the ones that are going to be coming into the workforce and they're going to want to have like something that's, more equitable than probably what a lot of people are seeing as they're entering the workforce today. But I think it's important, right? Like in the education piece, I don't think that gets talked about a lot when we talk about big events like this. So that was cool to see. It was that they're thinking about it from that lens of like how do we bring this to other people and make sure that they're aware of like what this actual holiday is for and like use that as a rallying thing. I thought that was cool.
Yeah, I agree too. Like just using organizing events as educational opportunities. I think it's huge. Like part of what we have to do in transitioning from the shitty world that we don't like to the better world that we want to build is to collectively educate each other in all the different things that we have to bring to the table. And it's sort of that sharing of knowledge and bringing it to different groups and different generations. Like that traditional aspect is really cool. So I just thought that was a good segment to talk about what Mayday is like right now in 2026. It really struck me was that I don't think the guy they interviewed in Argentina really spoke to it, but the woman from the Philippines basically mentioned cost of living directly tied to wars in the Middle East that the U.S. and Israel are launching against Iran. And then when you connect it to what people in America were saying, even the B-roll footage when they were showing the signs from some of the protests and stuff, they're connecting those issues as well. They want money for education and food and housing and healthcare and not for wars and oil and the billionaire class, right? These are very consistent messaging patterns that we're seeing across the world. I just think that interconnection is really cool. So I wanted to connect it with this section I want to read from Howard Zinn's book, A People's History of the United States. I'll try to explain the context for this passage. This comes, I don't know what chapter this is. It's like 18 or 23, chapter 23, The Coming Revolt of the Guards. So this takes place right at the end of Bush Sr.'s presidency, right before the Clinton era. And Howard Zinn is talking about the guards in society, not just like prison guards, although literally he's including like prison guards, but also police officers, teachers, nurses, workers whose labor is directly connected to the everyday functioning of society. This whole broad scope of middle-class people. Before in the history, he's talked about how the lower classes, poor people and very working class people have often rebelled, but the more middle class group has sort of stayed solid with the establishment. So at this moment in history, in like the early 90s era, he's pointing out how there's more and more indications that that middle group is also starting to feel the same disaffection that the lower classes have felt. And so this coming revolt of the guards is his sort of historical prediction that we're going to see those middle groups of people start to rebel more and more and more. And I think when we look at recent history since the 90s, that's largely been true. But this passage at the end of that chapter is sort of him being a little utopian and just sort of talking about what this transition from the bad place to the good place could look like and what that work would entail. But it's admittedly a kind of utopian vision. So I'm going to kind of read the last page or two from this chapter. So Howard Zinn writes, "Let us imagine the prospect for the first time in the nation's history of a population united for fundamental change. Would the elite turn, as so often before, to its ultimate weapon, foreign intervention, to unite the people with the establishment in war? It tried to do that in 1991 with the war against Iraq, but as June Jordan said, it was, quote, a hit the same way that crack is, and it doesn't last long, unquote, unquote. With the establishment's inability either to solve severe economic problems at home or to manufacture abroad a safety valve for domestic discontent, Americans might be ready to demand not just more tinkering, more reform laws, another reshuffling of the same deck, another New Deal, but radical change. Let us be utopian for a moment so that when we get realistic again, it is not that realism so useful to the establishment and its discouragement of action, that realism anchored to a certain kind of history empty of surprise. Let us imagine what radical change would require of us all. The society's levers of power would have to be taken away from those whose drives have led to the present state, the giant corporations, the military, and their politician collaborators. We would need, by a coordinated effort of local groups all over the country, to reconstruct the economy for both efficiency and justice, producing in a cooperative way what people need most. We would start on our neighborhoods, our cities, our workplaces. Work of some kind would be needed by everyone, including people now kept out of the workforce, children, old people, handicapped people. Society could use the enormous energy now idle, the skills and talents now unused. Everyone could share the routine but necessary jobs for a few hours a day and leave most of the time free for enjoyment, creativity, labors of love, and yet produce enough for an equal and ample distribution of goods. Certain basic things would be abundant enough to be taken out of the money system and be available free to everyone. Food, housing, healthcare, education, transportation. Those are the things he lists that should be free for everyone. The great problem would be to work out a way of accomplishing this without a centralized bureaucracy, using not the incentives of prison and punishment, but those incentives of cooperation which spring from natural human desires, which in the past have been used by the state in times of war, but also by social movements that gave hints of how people might behave in different conditions. Decisions would be made by small groups of people in their workplaces and their neighborhoods, a network of cooperatives in communication with one another, a neighborly socialism avoiding the class hierarchies of capitalism and the harsh dictatorships that have taken the name socialist. People in time, in friendly communities, might create a new, diversified, nonviolent culture in which all forms of personal and group expression would be possible. Men and women, black and white, old and young, could then cherish their differences as positive attributes, not as reasons for domination. New values of cooperation and freedom might then show up in the relations of people, the upbringing of children. To do all that in the complex conditions of control in the United States would require combining the energy of all previous movements in American history, of labor insurgents, black rebels, Native Americans, women, and young people, along with the new energy of an angry middle class. People would need to begin to transform their immediate environments, the workplace, the family, the school, the community, by a series of struggles against absentee authority to give control of these places to the people who live and work there. These struggles would involve all the tactics used at various times in the past by people's movements: demonstrations, marches, civil disobedience, strikes and boycotts and general strikes, direct action to redistribute wealth, to reconstruct institutions, to revamp relationships. Creating in music, literature, drama, all the arts, and all the areas of work and play in everyday life, a new culture of sharing, of respect, a new joy in the collaboration of people to help themselves and one another. There would be many defeats, but when such a movement took hold in hundreds of thousands of places all over the country, it would be impossible to suppress because the very guards the system depends on to crush such a movement would be among the rebels. It would be a new kind of revolution, the only kind that could happen, I believe, in a country like the United States. It would take enormous energy, sacrifice, commitment, and patience, but because it would be a process over time, starting without delay, there would be the immediate satisfaction that people have always found in the affectionate ties of groups striving together for a common goal. All this takes us far from American history into the realm of imagination, but not totally removed from history. There are at least glimpses in the past of such a possibility. In the 60s and 70s, for the first time, the establishment failed to produce national unity and patriotic fervor in a war. There was a flood of cultural changes such as the country had never seen in sex, family, personal relations, exactly those situations most difficult to control from the ordinary centers of power. And never before was there such a general withdrawal of confidence from so many elements of the political and economic system. In every period of history, people have found ways to help one another, even in the midst of a culture of competition and violence, if only for brief periods, to find joy in work, struggle, companionship, nature. The prospect is for times of turmoil, struggle, but also inspiration. There's a chance that such a movement could succeed in doing what the system itself has never done, bring about great change with little violence. This is possible because the more of the 99% that begin to see themselves as sharing needs, the more the guards and the prisoners see their common interest, the more the establishment becomes isolated and ineffectual. The elite's weapons, money, control of information would be useless in the face of a determined population. The servants of the system would refuse to work to continue the old deadly order and would begin using their time, their space, the very things given them by the system to keep them quiet, to dismantle that system while creating a new one. The prisoners of the system will continue to rebel as before in ways that cannot be foreseen, at times that cannot be predicted. The new fact of our era is the chance that they may be joined by the guards. We readers and writers of books have been, for the most part, among the guards. If we understand that and act on it, not only will life be more satisfying right off, but our grandchildren or our great-grandchildren might possibly see a different and marvelous world. So that is the end of that chapter. And I'm just thinking about that, which was written in the context of the early 90s political situation and what's changed since then, where we're at today with Mayday and all the organizing we see going on. And I'm thinking about mass communications and social media and how these things make interconnection more immediate and possible to do organizing at a larger and larger scale. You can think about movements like Occupy Wall Street, Black Lives Matter, the protests in support of Palestine against the genocide in Gaza, the No Kings protests, and like they said, like Amy Goodman said, over 3,000 different Mayday demonstrations in the U.S. alone this year. What are some ways that you guys have, this is just sort of an open question, ways that you've noticed or any evidence you've seen for a sort of growing alignment or sense of solidarity among average people? Like there does seem to be this palpable shift towards at least a common understanding that those people in power aren't it, and we need some other solution. There seems to be some kind of shift in that direction. What are just some things you guys have noticed? Any vibes or feelings or even actual evidence that has indicated that shift for you?
Yeah, I think the one that immediately came to mind, because you're, I think, referencing, or Howard Zinn there was referencing the reaction to the Vietnam War, I think was what he was referring to with it didn't create the same rally around the flag effect where they saw significant resistance to it. And I think the parallel is with Iran, like immediately there was resistance. Like this was never there was no bump, right? And I think that this is another good spot to go if you're if you listen to the Pod Save America guys. They talk specifically about polling related to Iran immediately after and compare it to conflicts and whatnot. And that is not that is not turning any approval ratings up for this administration. So I think that's the first thing I thought of was like that parallel right there and how that's clearly not working out for them.
Yeah, totally. And even just to contextualize that a little bit, because like you said, Howard Zinn was referencing the Vietnam War. Even Vietnam and then Bush Sr.'s Iraq War and even the 2000s forever wars kind of had an initial support when they were launched, like initial fervor and patriotism, and then a protest movement that developed right behind them and sort of critiqued them strongly right away. But with the Iran war, it was no support at all immediately, which was a big shift, I think, in the polling.
Yeah, it's huge.
I was thinking about how lately online over the last like 5 to 10 years, I've noticed more like comments that kind of evoke, like it went from like cynicism to nihilism. And people are like, hey, what do you want us to do? We can't do anything. The people in charge. So there's definitely like a much more nihilistic tone in the air where I'm visiting the West.
Yeah, it's like it starts as kind of a jovial critique. It's like, oh, this sucks. Let's laugh about it. And then it's more like depressing, like, oh, fuck, it really sucks. There's nothing we can do about it.
Yeah.
And then people, I think now, like I've seen what you're like, that echoes some of my experience online too. I've also seen people talk about how to deal with despair, right? Like there's a collective despair when we recognize how bad everything sucks. And the wisdom that organizers always push is that action is the antidote to despair. So I think this is kind of the vein that Ken Klippenstein has been covering with like shooters, and he's sort of comparing these active shooter events like assassination attempts to things like general strikes and just ways outside of the establishment way of doing things to make immediate change. People are fed up with inaction and looking for ways to solve problems in an immediate way. And sometimes that looks like a psychotic break where someone becomes a shooter, or it looks like, hey, let's get together and plan a general strike. And you're going to see more and more of all of these different ways of trying to make something happen, right? And so I think what I mentioned before is just like how the terribleness and the possibility exist at the same time. And it's almost like as one gets ratcheted up, the scope of possibilities also gets opened up. What becomes possible in a positive way is also radically available to us in the moment. And so days like today are really interesting to see how much people are really going to engage with this momentum. But yeah.
And I do think that's like another callback to this same episode, right? That the Plattner possibly, like if he wins and goes to the Senate, then you have, he actually mentioned this in this conversation with Jon Stewart, and we've talked about it on our podcast too. You know, the Senate was the bulwark against the common people, right? That's how it was stood up. But then you've got, you know, Sanders in there, and then hopefully, you know, Plattner, more common people, right? So, and I think that is absolutely driven by what you're talking about right now, which is, you know, there's a need for action, and hopefully more people stand up, and, you know, like you said, that's just another way. So
yeah, for me, it always comes back to this basic idea of democracy, like democracy as not an ideal or like an abstract concept, but an activity, like an everyday activity. Democracy in more and more places, more and more often. Democracy in your local neighborhood, democracy in your local workplace. Like the workplace is, it's a particular kind of event, you know, you can organize it in a hierarchical way where one person calls all the shots and everybody else just does what they're told. Or you could recognize that you're a group with democratic potential, and you could say, hey, what if we just have meetings every day and decide things together? Like workers in the Rust Belt in Ohio would never have collectively decided to send their jobs overseas. Mm. If you had democracy in the workplace, that never happens. And so I'm a big fan of democracy, not just like as a government, I mean, an everyday life system. Like everything should be democratic. Your family, your community, your workplace, it should be democratic. Everyone should get a say. Everyone's voice should be respected and heard, and you should make decisions collectively. That's really what democracy comes down to. So the more we can stitch those little networks of democratic nodes together using this wonderful infrastructure of the internet, the more we can have those small and large-scale conversations about democracy at the same time. End of soapbox, I guess.
We covered a lot today. Listen to our episode on Thursday that will be covering part 2 of our 2-part series on the Adam Curtis documentary, A Century of the Self. We're covering the last 2 episodes of that documentary on Thursday. And then coming up after that, we are going to start our first book of the season, and that is Minority Rule by Ari Berman. It's called The Right-Wing Attack on the Will of the People and the Fight to Resist It. Ari Berman, the author of Give Us the Ballot. So we'll start that. But yeah, that's all we've got for today. So stay safe, stay aware, and remember that propaganda loves you.